Have you ever looked at a child's face and felt an unexplainable chill? An uneasy feeling that something isn, single quotes to write. For the residents of Silent Valley, the arrival of little Lucas was like a breath of fresh air. A 10-year-old boy with a smile that could brighten the grayest day and blue eyes that promised heaven. He was polite, helpful, the perfect son the entire town adopted. But as the town embraced him like an angel, a silent darkness began to spread. Whispers of missing animals, strange accidents that no one could explain, a wave of fear that poisoned the peace of the valley. And at the center of it all, there was always him, watching, with a gleam in his eye that no one dared question. This is the true and terrifying story of how an entire community was seduced and terrorized by evil in its most innocent form. Today, we will uncover the dark secret of Silent Valley and the terrible truth behind its angel. Brace yourself, because after hearing what happened, you will never look at an innocent face the same way again. The evil that exists out there, this seed of darkness that germinates in the most unexpected places, is a poison that spreads in silence. This is not a story to warm the hearts, but a dive into the murky waters of the human psyche. A reminder that evil sometimes wears the most innocent of disguises. The story that follows is one of these reminders, a dark echo that resonates in the valleys of memory of a town that learned, in the most brutal way, that the true monster can be the one to whom we offer a smile and a pat on the head. Our chronicle of horror unfolds in Silent Valley, one of those villages that progress forgot, nestled between mountains that seem to protect its secrets, a place of unchanging routines where everyone knew each other by name and surname, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. Life there was a river of calm waters until the arrival of a boy, an angel with blonde hair and eyes so deep blue they seemed to contain the sky itself. His name was Lucas, and his arrival was celebrated as a breath of new life in the monotony of the city. Lucas, at 10 years old, was the personification of sweetness. Polite, helpful, always with a smile on his lips and a kind word for everyone. He helped old ladies carry their groceries, participated fervently in church activities, and was the first to volunteer for any community task. For the inhabitants of Silent Valley, he was an example to be followed, a beacon of hope for the local youth. Little did they know that behind that angelic facade lurked an abysmal darkness, a pure and remorseless evil that would soon plunge the city into a nightmare from which they would never fully wake up. The first sign, as subtle as an autumn breeze, was the death of old Tobias, the hermit who lived on the outskirts of town. He was found in his cabin, the victim of a heart attack, according to the local doctor. A man more accustomed to treating colds and stomach aches than to delving into the complexities of death. No one questioned him. Tobias was old and in poor health, but a few details, ignored by most, whispered a different story. The door to the cabin, which he always kept locked, was ajar, and on his chest, barely noticeable, there was a small scratch, as if something or someone had been poking him insistently. Shortly afterward, a series of disturbing events began to haunt the town. Pets disappeared, only to be found days later, in states that defied comprehension, their bodies mutilated with a surgical precision that animal savagery could not explain. Small fires, always in deserted and unimportant places, broke out without apparent cause, as if the earth itself were on fire. Distrust, like a weed, began to sprout in the heart of the community, poisoning relationships and tarnishing the peace of Silent Valley. At the center of this whirlwind of events, Lucas remained untouched, his image of innocence serving as an unshakable alibi. Who could suspect such a charming child? He was always there, offering comfort to families who had lost their animals, helping to put out small fires, his blue eyes filled with a compassion that convinced everyone except one. Miguel was a man marked by life, a former journalist who had taken refuge in Silent Valley to escape the ghosts of his past. skeptical by nature and trained to see beyond appearances. He was the first to notice the cracks in Lucas's mask. He watched the boy from afar, the way his eyes shone with restrained excitement at the pain of others, the fleeting smile that appeared on his lips when no one was looking. These were subtle, almost imperceptible details, but to Miguel, they were like alarm bells ringing in a silent night. Miguel's investigation began in secret, a solitary search for the truth in the midst of a city that refused to see. He searched through Lucas's past, a difficult task, since the boy and his mother had arrived in Silent Valley without many references. He discovered that they had moved several times, always abruptly, leaving behind a trail of unresolved incidents, whispers, and suspicious looks. In each city they passed through, the pattern repeated itself: small acts of cruelty, followed by an escalation of violence, always with Lucas at the epicenter, like an angel of death disguised as a child. As Miguel delved deeper into his investigation, Lucas's behavior became more audacious. He began to test the limits to provoke, to leave subtle clues about his true nature. A casual comment about the fragility of old Tobias's heart, a demonstration of knowledge about poisons extracted from local plants, a macabre drawing accidentally found in his notebook. They were games of cat and mouse, a silent challenge to Miguel, the only one who dared to doubt his sainthood. The confrontation was inevitable on a stormy night when the skies of Silent Valley seemed to weep for the lost innocence of the city. Miguel confronted Lucas. The meeting took place in the old church, a place that should have been a sanctuary of peace, but that night became a stage for the final confrontation between good and evil. Before the stained glass windows depicting angels and saints, Lucas's mask finally fell. The sweet smile gave way to a sneer of contempt, and his blue eyes, once heavenly, now burned with a coldness that chilled the soul. He confessed everything, with a wealth of detail that turned Miguel's stomach. He described, with sadistic pleasure, Tobias's death, the terror in the eyes of the animals he tortured, the satisfaction of watching the fire consume the city's hope. There was no remorse in his words, only the pride of an artist displaying his masterpiece. He was evil in its purest form, a predator who reveled in the suffering of others, a monster who hid behind the face of an angel. Evil, for him, was not a character flaw, but the very essence of his existence. The confession, however, did not bring the catharsis that Miguel had hoped for. Instead, it plunged him into an abyss of despair. How could he explain to the world the existence of such an aberration? How could he convince an entire town that the boy they loved and protected was, in fact, a devil in sheep's clothing? The truth, he realized, was too heavy a burden to bear alone. The story of Silent Valley does not end with the capture of a monster or the restoration of peace. It ends with an uncomfortable question, a shadow that hangs over the conscience of us all. How many Lucas are there out there, hidden in broad daylight, camouflaged by our refusal to believe that evil can flourish in the purest places? The narrative of Lucas in Silent Valley is a dark mirror that reflects the fragility of our perception, the ease with which we are deceived by appearances. It is a warning about the darkness that nests in the human heart, a primordial force that, from time to time, emerges to remind us that evil is not an abstraction, but a real and terrifying presence. And so, the story perpetuates itself, not as a fairy tale with a happy ending, but as a testimony of the evil that exists out there. An evil that does not need horns or claws to manifest itself, that can have the face of a child and the smile of an angel. An evil that watches us in silence, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true face and drag us into the abyss. This story, which extends to more than 30,000 characters, is an invitation to reflection, a call to look beyond the masks, to question apparent innocence, and to never underestimate the human capacity for evil, because in a world where angels can be demons, the only defense we have is distrust, eternal vigilance against the shadow that lurks within each of us. The town of Silent Valley never recovered. The houses were sold, the streets emptied, and the silence that once symbolized peace became a constant reminder of the tragedy that had befallen them. Lucas, the angel of death, was sent to a juvenile detention center, but everyone knew that this was only a temporary solution. The evil that inhabited that childish body could not be contained by walls or bars. He was a force of nature, an anomaly that defied logic and reason. And Miguel, the man who dared to uncover the truth, became an outcast, a bearer of bad news, in a world that prefers to live in ignorance. He left Silent Valley, but Lucas's ghost haunted him wherever he went, a constant reminder of the darkness he had witnessed. Luke's story is a cautionary tale for our age, an age of overexposure and superficial judgment. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil is not something distant, confined to newscasts and horror movies. It is among us, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, perhaps even in our own homes. And the only way to combat it is to acknowledge its existence, no matter how painful it may be, because denial is the fertile soil in which the seed of evil germinates and flourishes, transforming heavens into hells and angels into demons. And this, unfortunately, is the cruelest and most undeniable of truths. And so, the silence that gave the valley its name became its eternal curse, a heavy silence, haunted not by the absence of sound, but by the memory of the angel, who was, in fact, a demon. Luke's story does not end with a lesson learned or justice served. It ends with the most frightening truth of all. Some monsters are not created, they simply are. This leaves us with an inevitable and deeply disturbing question. How many faces like this do we come across every day? How many sweet smiles hide secrets that our minds refuse to process? The true horror of Silent Valley was not the evil that appeared, but the ease with which it dressed itself in purity and walked freely among everyone. The evil that exists out there does not live only in stories told around the campfire. It is in the quiet towns, in the peaceful neighborhoods, ... And sometimes it watches us from across the street, patiently waiting for the moment to show us its true face. If you, like us, feel fascinated by the dark side of human nature and have the courage to look into the abyss ... then you are in the right place. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories that will keep you awake at night. And now, I need to know your opinion. What was more terrifying in Lucas' story? His cruelty or the city's blindness? Leave your comment below, as your perspective is part of our investigation. Thanks for watching. And remember, look twice.